Crescent City Steakhouse, a true neighborhood restaurant operated by the Vojkovic family since 1934. It is the oldest steakhouse in the city of New Orleans. Serving only hand-cut, prime-aged, corn-fed beef for over 80 years, Crescent City Steakhouse has become a dining destination for both die-hard locals and adventurous travelers who seek traditional, timeless New Orleans cuisine. Crescent City Steakhouse, 1001 North Broad, on the corner of St. Philip, in the heart of New Orleans.
Fall in love with autumn with PJ's new seasonal lattes. Our pumpkin latte brings you all the flavors of a pumpkin pie with hints of cinnamon and nutmeg, like your favorite holiday dessert in a cup. And our s'mores latte with flavors of toasted marshmallows, warm milk chocolate, and graham cracker cinnamon is sure to bring back campfire memories. The PJ's Fall Seasonal Lattes, available at your local PJ's only for a limited time.
The owners of the Delachey's Wine Bar on St. Charles Avenue have opened up their newest creation uptown on Maple Street called Chez Delachey, a new local wine bistro featuring a larger menu of small and large plates, a brighter atmosphere, and full table service. Additionally, patrons can enjoy a large patio out front as well as an extensive wine list offering selections from around the world. It's Chez Delachey, 7708 Maple Street between Carrollton and Broadway.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime Sports. Hey, I'm your host, Scott Alexander, and what a week it was for sports this past weekend and last week as well. The College World Series culminated on Sunday, and oh my goodness, we told you who to root for last week. We said, why not the Ole Miss Rebels? For the second straight year, a team from Mississippi, last year's Mississippi State, this year it's Ole Miss. They get their first College World Series title, and they were the 64th team. I mean, 64 out of 64 that was picked into the tournament. They go all the way. They go 10-1 in the NCAA tournament, and it culminated with the championship series against Oklahoma, and boy, what a thrilling series that was. It got dicey. Ole Miss got up a nice lead in that first game. Then Oklahoma came back and made it close. And then, just when you thought the Sooners were going to take over, this happened.
It's only a two-run game. You get McCants here, and you're still in business.
2 down, 1-1 pitch. This ball driven to right, going back, Spikerman. See you later! Caught in the bullpen, and a 2-run home run for McCants. A huge hit for Ole Miss. Six-2 Rebels. And another shot, this one deep to right center field. Going back, looking up, and it's gone! Back-to-back home runs, the bottom of the order delivers. Calvin Harris leaves the yard. 7-2 Rebels.
Comes in, he's got to go left on left, and he changed it.
Justin Bench, wait a minute. Back to back to back. 3 in a row. Justin Bench, 4th of the year, 8-2. And Ole Miss has got the sticks out.
And to fully appreciate what had happened, Oklahoma had cut the lead to 4-2. They had bases loaded, no outs the inning before. They had 3 straight strikeouts to get out of that. Ole Miss comes back, gets the momentum back with those 3 back-to-back-to-back home runs. That has not happened in the College World Series since 1998, and that was the LSU Tigers. And speaking of the Tigers, the head coach for Ole Miss, Mike Bianco, is a former LSU Tiger. He played there back in the 80s when they first were going to World Series. You see him there with Ben McDonald. So what a great, great story. There's Albert, don't call me Joey Bell. Bianco is a great man, and it couldn't happen to a better guy. He loves LSU. He loves the state of Louisiana, but he is now the first champion Ole Miss Rebels in college baseball history for that team. And speaking of LSU, even though they weren't on the field, what a great week it was for head coach Jay Johnson. What a story this has become. he has had, coming out, he inherited some players. He brought some great players in. But my goodness, next year, look out, Tiger fans, because it is going to be off the hook. This past week, he had major players come in the transfer portal, and let's start with a guy that will immediately be a fan favorite. His name is Tommy Tanks White. He's a first baseman from NC State. Look at that exuberance. Tiger fans are going to love him. And oh, by the way, he hit 362, and he had a NCAA freshman record, 27 home runs, and he probably would have led the nation had he played more games. He played 55. The guy who led the nation had 12 more games. So this guy you see right here coming to LSU, he had the most home runs per ratio of games played. And look at this. We already know who Dylan Cruz is. He's going to be the first pick of next year's draft. Tommy Tanks might be the first pick of the draft 2 years from now because he was just a freshman. So these two guys are going to be dangerous for SEC opponents. And looks like the SEC baseball Twitter knew that as well. Other guys they got. Pitching was a sore spot sometimes this season. They went out and got a potential first-round pick from Vanderbilt, Christian Little. The only time he really got lit up, by the way, was when he played LSU. But this guy's got a mid-3 ERA. He's got that leg kick. He's going to be nice in this rotation. Could be the weekend starter on Fridays. Also, they happen to bring in another pitcher. How about this? Dylan Tebrake, the two-time Big East Pitcher of the Year for Creighton. That's 2 in a row he got that. And how about this? 190 strikeouts this past season. 190 in one season. LSU's leader last season, Mikhail Hilliard, only had 73, almost 1/3 of that. So he's shoring up the pitching, and they lost a couple middle infielders in the transfer portal, LSU did. Oh, so by the way, they went and got one of the Big 12's best middle infielders, Jack Pineda, you see from Baylor right there. He is a guy that's going to play shortstop and second base. He's already in LSU attire. This guy hit .311 over the past 2 seasons. He had 11 home runs, 8 triples, 31 doubles, and a fielding percentage of .960. Good work right there by Jay Johnson. It's going to be fun to watch LSU baseball. They came on strong at the end of the year, and I'm sure they're going to pull that momentum to go right on. Let's switch gears. How about a little Pelicans? What a big week it was for them as well. We knew last season how they finished strong after that porous start. But this draft, they had the 8th pick thanks to the Los Angeles Lakers falling apart and tanking. Well, let's get to where they got. Dyson Daniels. Trajan Langdon said they couldn't wait see if he could fall to 8. There were some projections at 5, 6, and 7. They got the man they wanted, and here's a refreshing thing. This is a team, you see Trajan Langdon right there. He works with David Griffin, but he is officially the general manager. He said they couldn't wait for this guy. They couldn't wait to get him because, listen, he loves defense first, and that is refreshing. We saw what Herb Jones has done for this franchise, and they've become a defensive team. But when you have Zion Williamson coming back, obviously Brandon Ingram and C.J. McCollum and Jonas Valanciunas and these guys were great. Well, now you got a guy you don't have to put in as a starter. Usually a top 10 pick. Those guys you want to start right away. But this team has gotten so loaded, he's going to be a luxury, and he's going to learn the NBA coming off the bench. And there you see his mother. His mother has become a sensation. Britta is her nickname. Britta, cool. Daniels, and that's her husband. But this guy right here is this girl right here. She was on the New York Post front page of the sports page talking about how she stole the draft because obviously people were liking her. So that's going to be interesting for Pelicans fans as well when she comes down to visit. Also, how about this? The second-round pick, E.J. Liddell. This is a guy that many projected to be in the first round. And normally second-round picks you don't think much about, right? You don't think that they're going to play much. Well, we thought that with Herb Jones last season, and all he did was start the entire year, became one of the all-defensive players in the NBA. Certainly an all-NBA rookie guy as well. And so E.J. Liddell, who I watched in the NCAA tournament, did some serious damage. That's going to be a nice pickup for them. Now the Pelicans have 15 contracts already because 15 is the max, but we'll see because I think this guy has a future, if not with the Pels, certainly in the NBA. So it's been fun to watch that whole thing. And let's go to Stanley Cup because, listen, this is the first time in my life that I can truly admit that I watched every minute of the Stanley Cup Finals. Every single minute. I have a little bit of an interest in the Colorado Avalanche for a number of reasons, but let me say this right quick. This team was fun to watch, and they beat the 2-time defending champion Tampa Bay Lightning. It got a little dicey. They went up 2-0 in the series. Then it was 3-1 in the series. Tampa Bay won 3-2, and then Game 6 down in Tampa, the Colorado Avalanche won their 3rd title and their first in about 20 years. So congrats to them. You know what? I didn't grow up with hockey. There's no ice down here in New Orleans. But now I've learned to appreciate that sport because these guys are much more athletic than I thought. I've watched some hockey, but my goodness, watching that for 6 straight games and watching the intensity of full 60 minutes going back and forth and knocking each other crazy, but still doing what they do on skates just still blows me away. Now let's go closer to home. How about the annual thing they've done now for 26 years? The Manning Passing Academy has become a big thing. You know the players right there. Peyton, Archie, Eli, and of course Coop, the oldest of the brothers. And let me say this. Now we're going to segue here before I get to his son. How about who was over there? Miles Brennan. They always had these great quarterbacks, and they had a ton of them. Miles Brennan, obviously, it looks to be the incumbent to play at LSU. He's going to have some competition with Jaden Daniels, the transfer from Arizona State. But I thought it was interesting that Max Johnson, the guy who took his place when he got hurt last season, now he's at Texas A&M. They had some nice banter. They were joking with each other, having fun, and it's just nice to see these guys together. But it's going to be a fun, interesting, practice before the season starts for Miles Brennan to see who's going to win that quarterback job coming up next fall. Also going there, we mentioned Arch Manning. That is Cooper's son. Cooper, obviously was a great player at Ole Miss himself before he had some health issues and he had to give it up. But Arch Manning looks to be the next in the Manning quarterback thing. Obviously, Archie was great at Ole Miss and with the Saints. We know what Peyton and Eli did with their Super Bowl MVPs. But Arch is a guy that has probably been more ballyhooed than all of them. And obviously, he's been a guy that we knew was going to be the first #1 player in this year's class for like 4 years. He's going to a place that's not in the SEC right now like the rest of his family. But guess what? Texas will be in the SEC by his 3rd season. And I know he can't wait to play in all those great stadiums. But Arch Manning going to Texas, Steve Sarkisian, obviously an offensive-minded coach. He did some great things when he was Saban's assistant at Alabama. He's been a head coach before, obviously, at USC and Washington. He's getting another chance. Last year wasn't great for Sarkisian, 5-7. Arch Manning will be there in a couple of years. We'll see what happens when he has to face and compete with Quinn Ewers. So that's going to be interesting as well. And moving forward, how about the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame? It's an event that I absolutely love. Ronnie Rance does such a great job. The former LSU baseball pitcher is the CEO and president of this event. And this year, another great class. You got Jari Evans. How about this? People don't know this. The Saints only have 3 NFL Hall of Famers, Pro Football Hall of Famers. We know who they are. It's Ricky Jackson. It's obviously Morton Anderson and Willie Roaf. Jari Evans and Drew Brees will be the 4th and 5th. You can bank that. Jari Evans was 4 straight All-Pro, NFL All-Pro, not Pro Bowl. All-Pro. That means for 4 straight years, he was one of only 2 guards that were the best in the entire NFL. This guy is a Pro Football Hall of Famer eventually, and he got inducted this week. And here's the thing. That's the first time a New Orleans Saint had ever been first team, and the first time since. No one's ever done it. First time, 4 straight years, All-Pro. Other people there, a guy that I went to college with, Eric Andelsek. This guy had the biggest biceps I've ever seen. That picture doesn't show it. He was sculpted giant, and he was a giant of a man. He passed away early when he was player for the Detroit Lions, but he was a great LSU Tiger in the 80s. That's Kyle Williams right there. Kyle Williams is, he was a Buffalo Bill, but Kyle Williams is another one. He was an All-American LSU in the early 2000s. He was also the national championship team in 2003. He had a long career. There he is second. Eli Manning, speaking of that, back in the early 2000s. But he had a long career with the Buffalo Bills, one of their favorites. He was a Pro Bowler several times, one of the great defensive ends in LSU and Buffalo Bills history. He is now in the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame as well. And there are other guys out there. Tony Robichaux, he was the coach for the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. Back then it was UL Lafayette, and probably even before that Southwest. But this team was always on the map because of Tony Robichaux, and they're continuing to do that. They went to the College World Series, a small school out of Lafayette. I mean, not size-wise, but, most people would know. Jay Cicero, another great guy. He is the head of the Greater New Orleans Sports Council. He's the guy that helps bring in the Final Fours, the Super Bowls, the national championships. So I'm glad he was rewarded as well. He's also going to be a guest on this show coming up very soon. And I can't be remiss not to bring up the Saints Hall of Fame. How about that? Devery Henderson was just inducted this past weekend. Obviously a Super Bowl player for that team, a starter on that team. Fred McAfee played in the league for 15-plus years. This guy has been around the Saints organization, still is with the Saints organization, the great utility player of all time with the Saints. So that's another great honor for him. And I'd be remiss also not to bring up a couple of good friends of the show. These are media guys that were rewarded guys that come on the show quite often, Fletcher Mackel, who was the Sportscaster of the Year by the Louisiana Sports Writers. There was a vote in there, right there. Best TV Sportscast. Congrats to him on that. And also our friend Rod Walker with the NOLA.com and the Advocate. Congrats to him, Louisiana Sports Writer of the Year. I love those guys, and they deserve every bit of that recognition. Also, this show, speaking of the Pelicans, we're going to have Christian Clark from The Advocate, NOLA.com. He's going to talk all about the draft, all about Zion's situation. They are very close. He's also going to talk about the future and the bright respect for next season. Also, don't forget, we're going to have Tulane baseball head coach Jay Ulhman. I cannot wait. We had the football coach from Tulane, Willie Fritz, last week. We've had the basketball coach a few weeks ago, Rod Hunter, and now it's going to be Jay Ulhman. Stay tuned. Primetime Sports is coming up next, right here on WLAE.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding.
Hey, welcome back to Primetime Sports, and I can't wait for this next segment because you know I love Tulane, and we've already had, last week we had Willie Fritz, the head coach of the football team, and of course the quarterback last week as well. And earlier, I think on our second show, we had the basketball coach, Ron Hunter. But now it's baseball time. The College World Series just ended, and I want to get into that a little bit with my next guest, but I want to get to him right now. He's a new Tulane head coach. He was an assistant with Travis Jewett for a few years. He took over as an interim coach at the end of the season, and they took that interim tag off and made him the head coach. And here he is for the first time on Primetime Sports, Jay Ulhman.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show, my friend.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming, especially on short notice.
Yes, sir.
But I have to ask you, I want to get into you, the person. Usually, like I had Travis Jewett on 4 times.
Okay.
And by the way, before I'm going to do a quick segue here, because last time I had Travis on was my last show before COVID. And I've never had this happen before. And the show had gone to a half hour at that point because I got it on CBS, WWL, and they can only squeeze that in.
Yeah.
And that was terrible for me because I like to talk. And Travis, I asked him one question, and I swear to goodness that he talked for 10 straight minutes, and I thanked him and left. And he just went on a 10-minute. Do you know what I'm talking about? He was assuming the next question. He was like, all right, let's go to the pitching. All right, my shortstop. And it was unbelievable. What was he like as a coach with you?
Very gregarious,
right.
Just a big personality, and, had a lot of fun and really, uplifted the players, So that part, the energetic part, was really great in practice and how he treated our players,
So I want to get to know you, all right? So I did my research the last couple nights. I know you're from Redondo Beach. You play for the Seawolves or the
Seahawks.
Seahawks, that's it. The Seahawks over at Redondo.
Yep.
Is it Redondo Union?
It's Redondo Union.
Redondo Union.
Long ways from here, but yes.
Shortstop?
Yes, sir.
Played in Nevada?
Yes.
Shortstop?
Drafted by the Blue Jays in '92.
All right, let's continue.
Yep. So played at LA Harbor Junior College, which was a stone's throw from my house. A lot of tough players came in and out of that program. At one point, 10 straight players had played in a College World Series from our program, so a very proud tradition at my junior college.
So you said you were drafted by the Blue Jays
Yes.
in '92. You know what Pavlov's dog comes to mind? I produced Braves games for 14 years, but the year before I started doing that, I was a fan in the stands in Atlanta. I was living there. Ed Sprague hits that home run in Game 2. The Braves were going to go up 2-0 in that series, I believe. And then you got drafted before that, so you were
Joe Carter's homer.
Part of the organization, right? Joe Carter's homer was '93, though, right?
Yes, it was.
So '92, the Braves, but they had back-to-back. So you got drafted into an organization that literally won two World Series right when you got drafted.
Yeah, and George Bell, Lloyd Mosby, Tony Fernandez,
Barfield,
Dave Steeb, all kinds of really good players.
Unbelievable, right?
Yeah, and that was at one point that year. I don't tell people this a lot because it devalues my draft, but at that point, there was a thing that MLB instituted, was a draft and follow, and it was a 5-year deal. If they had drafted you in '92, they kept your rights for 5 years. So there was some projection that the scout that drafted me thought that I might get better and be worthy. And
was Tony Fernandez a shortstop then?
He was, but
right.
They eventually got rid of that rule because it wasn't the right kind of rule. So in 1 year they had a 5-year draft and follow, no more.
So you coached at your alma mater.
Yep.
And take me through the progression, because I mean you've been to a couple great places,
Yep.
and what was that like coaching there, and then your next step?
Yeah, so I moved on. I played, and then I moved on to coaching. Played at the University of Nevada in Reno, and then when I was done there, I actually broke my leg in half on a double play turn. A guy slid from me to you and snapped my leg in half.
Oh my goodness!
So that career was ended, and I'm actually grateful, because had I tried to go and play and continue my career, I wouldn't probably be in a position that I'm in now, which started me down my coaching path. So I was a grad assistant at my alma mater at Nevada to finish my degree. Went back to the junior college, my junior college, spent 1 year as the assistant, and then was named the head coach at age 25. Did that for 2 years. We had really great success for the 2 years I was there as the head coach, and then I moved on to go back to my alma mater to be the hitting coach, infield coach, and assistant recruiting coordinator.
You know, this reminded me of, though, when you just said that, but because, you know, it was fortuitous for you to have that injury, even though it probably was horrific at the time.
It was awful.
But Blake Dean said the same thing. It wasn't an injury. He just knew, and this was a star player, World Series, you know, superstar, first team All-SEC. He realized after a few years in the minors, he wanted to be a coach, and he didn't want to waste any more time. And he got that head coaching job at UNO at an early age after being, you know, in his alma mater for a little bit at LSU. But what were the benefits of that? I mean, because, I mean, when you are coaching early, some people say, hey, maybe you need to, you know, earn your stripes. But you got thrown in for an early age.
I did. You know, and I think, you know, the organizational components are really important. And at a junior college, you have to do everything. You got to mow the grass. You got to water the grass.
Yes,
you have to be a psychologist. You have to be a fundraiser. You have to be a psychologist and a mentor and a father when I wasn't a father. So I was thrown right in the fire. But I felt playing the position that I played really set me up to be a coach. You know, the middle of the field, playing shortstop and having to account for not just myself and what I'm doing, but my teammates and making sure that I was leading by example. So I've felt like since the you know, an early time of me playing, I've just kind of gravitated towards trying to be in a leadership position and relishing those kinds of roles.
And I know you had a great decade at Oregon. You know, what a great campus, what a great city Eugene is. But then you came to New Orleans, and, you know, I believe this is your first D1 head coach job now, right?
Yes, it is.
So this is a big step, too. But I want to hear the progression on how you got to New Orleans in general. I mean, what did you know about the city, and what are your thoughts of your perception of the city before, and what are they now?
So I had never been to New Orleans. The closest I had ever been was to Ruston, Louisiana.
Up north. Those Yankees.
That's what I understand. That's not considered Louisiana.
It is.
From some folks.
No, it is. I love Ruston. It's just a different part, though.
Right. So they like to have that banter.
Yes.
So I had done that when I was at the University of Nevada. I was coaching, and we played them often. Yeah, when they were in the Western Athletic Conference, and so I'd gotten close, but never been to New Orleans.
Tech.
At Louisiana Tech. So, you know, when I spent 10 years at the University of Oregon, and then my boss retired. We didn't do well enough at the end there for me to have the opportunity to take the reins of that program.
Yeah, you know that works.
And so it was time for me to find a new place, and I had known Travis for a long time. And I needed a job, and he needed a hitting coach and a recruiting coordinator because Eddie Smith took the volunteer job at LSU.
Right.
So there was a spot open, and I took the job sight unseen based on my relationship with him and what I knew about him through my time recruiting nationally, and we'd run in the same kind of circles. So I had never been here. So my first venture here was it was rainy, lightning, thunder. The streets were flooded.
Family must have loved this.
That was just me. So it was just me.
Okay.
But I had heard all the great things about New Orleans: the food, the culture, the city, the music.
So you came during a flood.
I did. It was perfect. And I say this in recruiting: it's easy to come to the place when it's perfect, when it's Chamber of Commerce weather. But come when it's not so great, And if you fall in love with it and you're good with it, then you're going to be just fine here. And so the 3 years that I've been here have been really great. The people have opened their arms to me. We've invested in the community. My kids play at Carrollton.
That's where I grew up playing.
My daughter's in the New Orleans Ballet, and she's going to start down the path of trying to be a professional there.
Good for her.
My wife teaches cello. She works at Stewart Hall. So we dived right in.
You're hitting me all over. That's where I went to grade school before it was Stewart Hall. That building, that's wild. I used to live around the corner from there too. But at Carrollton, played that for 7 years, 8 years. So you are entrenched in New Orleans. You know, and speaking of Carrollton, I'm going to do a quick segue again. I noticed one of the pictures of your kids playing Little League, and it was posed with some of the Tulane players were there supporting your kids. That shows me family right there.
Yeah, it does. And you know, the really cool thing too is not just our players that engage in them, but yeah, it's the football players. Those 4 studs right there.
That's pretty cool.
And you know, that's my 9-year-old with his team, and he has kind of adopted himself into the football guys, and they've treated him really well. And a lot of that happened when we had to leave for Ida and we went to Birmingham and stayed in the hotel, and there were video games, and the guys would play against my kids, and they just, you know, they've done a really nice job with my family and my boys, so really cool.
Willie talked a lot about that Birmingham stay that he thought was a few days, ended up being a month. Very cool, because I didn't realize the baseball stuff was going too. But I want to talk to you about the moment you took over for a guy you worked with, Travis, and that's never easy, right? I mean, you know, this is the guy that brought you in, and now you're basically having his job. What is that like? I've never really had the opportunity to ask someone that's a coach in any sport really what that's like, but what was it?
Bittersweet,
right?
Because my being is based on loyalty and those kinds of things, and so that's very difficult. But we had, you know, I had frank conversations that if I had the opportunity, that I was going to take the job, and he was supportive of that, and very supportive of my family. So he's been nothing but great that way. And you know, it's hard. You know, you go and you sit in the office that wasn't yours, and
strange, right?
It is very strange.
I mean, right.
Very strange. So, but you know, as time goes on, you know, you make things, you know, your own, and you bring in your own people, and you just kind of keep moving forward. It's unfortunately part of the business that I've been on that end a few times, and so it's very, very difficult, but it's life.
Well, we've had Troy Dannon on a few times on the show as well, and from the moment he came, you know, I know he's a Northern Iowa guy. He's always wanted to make that big splash hire. I mean, he's done it, and you know, he tried with Mike Dunleavy, who's obviously an NBA player. That didn't work, but he went to get Ron Hunter. Seeing that success, we've seen Willie Fritz. He got 3 bowls in a row at one point. And then, you know, he went for Jewett when a lot of people thought he might have hired Cannizzaro. I don't know if you know that whole story, but he was a legend here, right?
Absolutely.
And I remember that was surprised people, but I think it surprised a lot of people when he took a guy that was already here. And I'm glad. It took me 1 second to talk to you on the phone. Honestly, I'm telling you this. I was at Dickie Brennan's house, and I was talking to you. I'm like, I get it now. I mean, immediately. You are a gravitational person. I can tell that immediately. But what was it like when you felt that moment that they were really giving you the reins? I mean, you knew you were going to coach the rest of the season. But when you got the call to say, hey, we want to have you as our guy. Yeah,
that was pretty emotional for me, you know, waiting that long. But you know, I don't think the odds of the staff that's there keeping the jobs doesn't happen all the time, and I understood that through the process, and I even said that to Troy and the committee that was in there with him when we were interviewing, and I said, you're going to have the courage to hire me, because the optics of this are going to be really difficult. And I'm not afraid of that.
Dude, I love that you just said that. And you said that in the interview.
So, yeah, I did. And I meant that. And I meant every word.
Right.
So I'm also taking that approach to my coaching staff, too. I hired a pitching coach that is young and relatively unknown outside of the baseball world. But if you ask people Coach Izio, if you ask people within our walls of our business, there's a lot of positives that way. So he's very engaging. I think you would immediately gravitate to him as well, and I'm going to do the same thing, hopefully, with the other position too. So it's different today. It's not the using the hammer and the old do what I say, not what I do kind of environment. So you need to have players or coaches that can pull the players in and make them trust you and build that trust level and know that they're loved, but they can also be prodded a little bit too. So, I'm again not afraid of that, and I'm really honored that Troy gave me this opportunity. And how that happened, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're necessarily the first choice or the 10th choice. My dad always used to say to me, some of the best hires I ever made were guys that were the worst interviewers, or the guys that maybe weren't the most popular choice. And some of the worst hires I ever made were the guys that everything lined up. They were well spoken and they were polished, and then they get in the job and they can't function. So,
what does it mean when your former mentor at Oregon? And we have a picture of him with a quote on it, which I think is the coolest thing. When I read that, I was like, who's George Horton? And then I had to look it up, and I've got all the history of it. But that's cool to me. I mean, this is a guy that's saying they made the right move. This is the guy they want. And, from a guy that you worked with for several years, what did that mean to you?
Well, it means the world to me. That's a Hall of Famer with over 1,000 wins and national championship as an assistant and a head coach. And we invested a lot of time together moving that program forward, and it didn't end necessarily how we wanted it to, but there is no finer person and coach in America. And so for me to have his blessing and his stamp of approval certainly means a lot. He gave me an opportunity on 2 occasions to come work for him, and it was probably the best thing outside of my wife and my children that has happened to me.
So I noticed on the picture of Izio, the new pitching coach, the other title was recruiting coordinator.
Yes.
And one of the things in my research of you is that you're a relentless recruiter.
Thank you.
You love it. Obviously you're engaging, so I can see why you do well on the road. Does the head coach ever really give up that? I know you're more the captain of the ship as opposed to, but you're going to be on the trail as well?
I am, and I was, and so it's cool to be here with you. But I would like to be out there watching, future Green Wave players.
Much more interesting than me. That's for darn sure.
And this is part of the deal,
Right.
And I appreciate it. And any chance to promote our program and our institution are awesome things. But I don't think I'll give it up. And the reason I won't is because I spent 23 years doing the job, and I know what it's like to not have as much help at times as you would like to have. And so I'm going to do everything I can to help the 2 guys that are paid to go out and do their jobs too. I don't want to tell them what to do. I want to empower them to do the job the way they feel they need to do it. And I think with the personalities involved, they're going to get the right people, the right kind of baseball players for this program. So I'm thrilled for him. He's going to do really great things. And if I keep him or both of them, if I get the other guy on board, if I keep them 5 years, I'll be really happy. So.
This is exciting. Yeah. I can see the joy in your face.
Yep.
You're fired up for this job. Yep. You've paid your dues, and obviously you know what it takes. Yep. We have a tradition here, and we're going to get you to sign this one, but I have a blue pen. We're going to get you. I have a silver pen for that. But on air, last week we started. I decided to do something different post-COVID. I was going to, I'm going to do blue post-COVID. So Willie Fritz is here. Obviously, last week we had the quarterback, Michael Pratt, and you're going to be the 3rd one. But welcome to New Orleans.
Thank you.
Obviously, you've been here a while, but welcome as the head coach for the first time.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And one of the Tulane alums, we have a tradition also. We give away TAS shirts. A guy named Al Andrews started that company, and they're wonderful shirts. But I'm out of my supply right now, but I promise you I'll get you some.
Great.
But Coach, thanks, man.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for your time.
And thank you for taking the time on the recruiting show, too.
Absolutely.
So, hey, by the way, Tulane fans, if you watch this segment, you got to be fired up for next fall, next spring. Fall baseball, but next spring is when it really gets going. Jay Ulhman will be the head coach for the Tulane Green Wave, and I can't wait myself. Hey, coming up next, we're going to switch gears to round ball. Well, I had basketball here before. We're going to talk some basketball. And I don't have many media folks on this show very often, but when I do, it's guys I respect, and I can't wait to talk to Christian Clark for the first time. He is with the NOLA.com and the Advocate, and he covers the Pels, and he's been here for 3 or 4 years. We're going to talk a lot about Zion Williamson. We're going to get into that draft. We're going to mostly talk about the excitement building around this franchise for the first time in a long time. Right next on Primetime Sports.
Rock and roll will never die. It's old New Orleans, my, oh my. Come on, baby, let's go rock and roll at the city lane. All night, let's roll, let's rock and roll. Baby, do the rock and roll. Past mid-city lanes, the home of rock and roll.
Hey, don't forget my pimento cheese. Of course.
It's okay, I'll take it from here.
For the love of palmetto cheese.
Hey, welcome back to Primetime Sports, and I want to thank my previous guest, Jay Ulhman, the head coach of Tulane. He hopefully has a great year next season. It's his first year coming up, but he was the interim finishing the season. But right now, there's no interim at all. We have Christian Clark. He covers the New Orleans Pelicans. You know, basketball is my favorite sport, and the Pelicans are hot right now, finishing the season strong. Obviously, a great draft, and Zion Williamson looks like he's about to sign. Christian Clark is with NOLA.com and The Advocate. Welcome, buddy.
Sir.
First time on the show.
Happy to be here with a fellow hoops head.
There it is. Listen, anytime we get one of these basketball fans on, I love it. So talk about you first. Where are you from, and how'd you get into writing and basketball in general?
Yeah, I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and played a little bit in high school, and it was definitely nothing special, but kind of knew I wanted to get into NBA beat writing. I mean, I always really liked the NBA.
How old were you when you realized that?
Oh, man. Probably right at the end of high school,
wow.
I would say. Yeah. I mean, I just knew I liked the NBA and, liked writing and wanted to be in this space. And it took a couple years to get here, but I've been here in New Orleans 3 full years now, and I loved it.
So were you a Mavs fan back like the 06 team that almost beat Dwayne Wade? Was that your earliest? When did you become a fan?
Yes, I do remember the 2006 finals very well. That was
it was a tough one.
That was a tough time. Yeah.
Up 2-0 in the series, like 13-point lead in Game 3, and then Dwayne Wade took over. So that's when you first started liking him, or was it a little bit earlier than that?
Maybe even a little bit earlier than that. I liked Don Nelson a lot. I mean, he was kind of just a mad scientist, basically. The Mavericks teams from the early 2000s were just very fun. Like, they weren't playing basketball like a lot of other teams were playing basketball. Like, they liked to run. I mean, they didn't care about tradition necessarily. Like, they were throwing out, a power forward like Dirk who could shoot the ball a little bit.
Absolutely.
But it was fun to see them, trying to push the envelope a little bit.
I remember when they had Dirk and Steve Nash at the same time. Was that too early for you before he went to Phoenix?
I do remember it, yeah.
That was fun. As far as New Orleans, how long have you been here, and what are your thoughts after 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I got hired right before the start of the 2019-20 season. I actually, they created a position basically because they got Zion. And that element of it has been very interesting. But it's been fun. I mean, a lot of my time here was spent during the pandemic, which made it weird. But it's felt normal now for a while, and that's been great and refreshing.
Well, you have a relationship with him, and I know it's closer than most media, but explain what that's like.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know him. I wouldn't say we're close or anything like that. But, yeah, I mean, I've followed his career very closely, certainly. And, I mean, I just think he's an extremely interesting player. I mean, I think at Duke, that was one of the greatest college seasons we've ever seen from anybody. It was just spectacular. And I know I was watching a lot of those games, and that was before I was here. And I thought, this is just something I've never seen before. Like, I've never seen a guy with this type of body who can jump like this.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, a lot's been made of his only playing 85 games, but those games that he's played, and I want you, obviously you cover them, led the NBA maybe in history for efficiency. I mean, can you explain how that is when you get all these greats? Like, what makes Zion special to do something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a historically efficient scorer when he's on the floor. I mean, if you just look at the games he's played, I think 85 games, something like 25 points per game on 61% shooting. I mean, if you just do a search on Basketball Reference of all the seasons in NBA history of guys who've averaged 25 points or more and 60% shooting, I think it's only 2 guys, Charles Barkley and Kevin McHale.
It's incredible, really.
So it's some pretty good company to be in, yeah.
What makes him special, though, as far as a player? I mean, obviously it seems like he gets the ball, he can score any time, but there's intangibles I think he has. When he's on the court, what makes his team better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're kind of, point guard skills in this frame that is, I don't know, a defensive ends frame.
Exactly.
I mean, look, you've been watching the game a lot longer than me, but the best comp is maybe Charles Barkley.
Much more explosive, though. I mean, Barkley was explosive in his prime, but, I mean, Zion was, like, before he even got basketball famous, we saw the videos of the dunks back in 8th, 9th, 10th grade, but we didn't know if he was a real basketball player. And then all of a sudden, even when he went into Duke, he wasn't supposed to be the first pick of the draft, but then as that season went along, he just exploded, and then he became the no-brainer first pick. How does it happen when a dude has that kind of explosion? Everybody's talking about the injuries. How do you not get hurt when you're coming down after, with that kind of explosion to the hoop with that kind of weight on you?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, you brought up a really interesting point. Where he went to high school, Spartanburg Day School in Spartanburg, South Carolina, is not known for basketball.
No,
I mean, it was very unusual for a guy with that type of talent to go to, a small private high school in South Carolina that's more kind of known for academics,
right, yeah.
really. And yeah, I mean, obviously tore it up there, but I think there was this question of, well, how will this translate to the Division I level? And you're right that, I mean, going into that year, I think that R.J. Barrett was actually viewed as the better prospect, right? And, as soon as we started watching those games, it was like, oh, yeah, Zion is the best player on this team.
Exactly. Now, as far as the season ending, you saw the beginning of the season. Obviously, 1-11. I think it was 3-16. Maybe it was even 1-12. But it was awful for a lot of reasons. Obviously, Zion, we expected to be there. He wasn't. But then you saw the maturation, and you saw them coming together. You better than anybody. What made this team special, even a little bit before CJ? Obviously, that was kind of the icing on the cake. But around December 22nd, they just started winning more, obviously, than they were before that. So what was the change? Because was it the Willie Green factor, finally everybody buying in, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of look at two things. I mean, I think the Willie Green hire was a huge moment for this franchise and really did turn some things around and helped get rid of a lot of the bad juju that was there from those first 2 years. And I think, too, just the front office has really prioritized, I think guys who are hard workers, guys who want to be in New Orleans, and guys who generally just care about the game. And I think, those two factors kind of played a role in that turnaround. I mean, it was ugly. I mean, I think they were 1-12, 3-16 at the start of the season, and slowly just started digging their way out of that hole. I thought Brandon Ingram was fantastic this year.
Yes.
I mean, in the playoffs, you saw it. I mean, he's a guy who can shine even on that elevated stage. But yeah, they just, they easily could have splintered or fractured. I think a lot of teams would, and they didn't.
You brought up a few good points, and I want to get to Ingram in a second because I think we've watched him mature before our eyes, and it's been a beautiful thing. But you've seen 3 coaches here, and you haven't even been here that long. Yeah. I mean, you've seen Gentry, obviously. The Van Gundy experiment didn't work, and obviously now Willie Green, it seems to be working fabulously. But what, in your eyes, is the difference between all 3? Because you said it was awful for a while, not just this season. It was awful when Van Gundy was here. You could feel the tension between the players and coach. But, yeah, talk about that maturation just between the coaches since you've been here.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen two head coaches get fired in an 8-month span.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It would need to happen, though.
Yeah. I mean, Alvin and Stan are both, a little bit older. Willie Green is more new school. Willie Green has the player background. I mean, Alvin and Stan, I think, played in college, but they didn't really, play in the NBA. Willie Green played 12 years in the NBA.
Yeah.
So I think he can relate to these guys on that level. I think he was the 41st pick in the draft.
And you see with Chris Paul there, they were teammates here in 2011. That's what I love. That moment right there, I literally teared up because I love Chris Paul. He was on my show back when he was in high school. And then to see this, because it wasn't just a coach. He coached him last season as an assistant. We all know that the season before with the Suns. But they played together. And that's kind of like with these players, they're like, some of these guys that played with him, and they all know that he played recently in the league. So does that make a difference in today's game?
I mean, there's no question about it. And I mean, Willie Green and Chris Paul, I mean, it's like a brother-like bond, I think. I mean, they're incredibly close. I mean, I even remember when he got hired last year, there was kind of, some whispers of like, well, will Chris Paul take a look at New Orleans now? Because, Willie's there. He probably made the right decision for him. I mean, They were a great team again. But totally, I mean, that's a really strong relationship. And it was something, I asked Willie a lot about this year because I think it was really interesting. I mean, you kind of are best friends with probably the best player in franchise history here. I think he felt like they came from pretty similar upbringings. And the other thing, too, was I think they both just liked competition. Like he told me they played, one-on-one after practice every season that they were here when they overlapped in 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
They kind of just went at each other. So
right.
I think, those two things, contributed to making them close.
And I remember that team, though, because I was living in Atlanta, but they made that run against the Lakers with, was that the year with Kobe Bryant? And they went to 6 games against them, and Chris Paul was in their face. Both big-time competitors, but now you talked about Ingram a second ago because that made me think of something. You've seen this whole deal when Ingram came. What were your thoughts when Ingram got here in the trade, obviously, for Anthony Davis? And I mean, personally, I wasn't too fired up about it, but I've watched this guy, and I have to admit I was 100% wrong. I've watched this guy become a quiet leader and then just become an assassin on the court. The playoffs, everybody in the country saw it. Everybody was like, okay, now this guy's on superstar level, no doubt about it. But you've watched the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw him look really comfortable on and off the floor this past season. Right. I think he has developed some really good relationships and friendships on the team. I mean, him and Najee Marshall and Jose Alvarado, like those guys are 3 peas in a pod, kind of going everywhere together. And, it's interesting if you think back the time of the trade. Ingram's last season in L.A., he overlapped with LeBron there.
Yeah.
That didn't go well. Ingram missed a lot at the end of that season with, blood clotting in his right arm. And I think there was a question of, well, this guy's the number 2 pick. Like, he's got some talent, but how good is he really? And, I mean, he immediately just went up a level when he came to New Orleans. I think, improving his outside shot was a factor in that.
It's money now.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
Yeah, and I mean, just, steady growth, too. I think if you talk to anybody in the Pelicans organization, they'll tell you he's just a really hard worker. He's a guy who doesn't have a lot of interest besides playing basketball. And I think that steady growth is probably a product of that.
Even, obviously, when the beginning of the season, you saw the national talking heads were like, someone were like, they got to go. This franchise needs to go to another city. And that kind of stuff blows me up. I can't stand it. But there was a morale issue in the beginning. I'm talking about the off the Van Gundy season. But when was it like, now it's a destination place almost. I mean, people are like, oh, I want to go play with Brandon Ingram. I want to go play with CJ, Zion. When CJ got here himself, he's like, I want to be here. And that kind of blew me away because, I mean, you could tell he meant it. And as an agent, I know this isn't a destination place. I just remember I was living in Atlanta, but I'm a New Orleans native. I love this city more than anything. But I would get asked all the time on radio shows, well, why not here? I mean, because, they were growing something. I'm like, listen, New Orleans is a great place. We all know it. We love it. But that's not a place that free agents are always looking at. But right now, this attitude this team has, and it seems like people want to be here.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like that really turned around the start of the Willie Green hiring, I think. I mean, it was just not the right fit between Stan Van Gundy and that roster. I mean, I won't go into details, but there's some...
Let me go on a segue because I do remember press conferences. What I loved about you before I even knew you, I would sit back and hear you. You in press conferences, you don't hold back. You just say it like it is. Sometimes I'd see Van Gundy's face and he'd be rolling his eyes or doing this. And so you saw that, and it was weird. And I want people to know, because I remember when he got hired, I'm always trying to be positive, and I was like, okay, this could work. But deep down, I've known JJ for a long, long time, before I was an agent, and I knew he hated him. And I was like, how is this going to work with this whole deal? But talk about that year and how weird it was.
Yeah, I think I definitely try to go into it with an open mind. It was a little bit strange that it's like, okay, I mean, this guy, he's just kind of, I mean, he's had a lot of success in his career, and I respect that. I mean, he took the Magic to the finals in 2009. Is just, he's a little more of a taskmaster, and it just seemed like a little bit of a weird fit with this roster. And I mean, I think, the pandemic certainly did not help there either. I mean, he didn't get to go through a real training camp or anything like that. But I think, I think Stan Van Gundy has forgotten more about basketball than I'll ever know. But I think if you can criticize him, there was not a great emotional intelligence that season. It was not, he didn't really understand.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like when to, these guys don't want to be yelled at right now. And if I continue to do that, then maybe they'll tune me out. I mean, that's kind of what happened in the way I look at it. I mean, I think he just got tuned out.
In the press conferences, I noticed, like, that, he would throw people under the bus. I mean, that's not with the NBA players today, because they're going to hear that stuff. And Willie Green is quite the opposite. He's a builder-upper. He's always just trying to relate to the player as opposed to demand things from him. And that to me is refreshing. But when C.J. McCollum came in, this has seemed to be the turning point. They finally had that backcourt leader, and you saw it firsthand. So, what was the difference when he became, a guy that became one of the leaders on this team?
Yeah, I totally agree. That was a turning point. I mean, like other agents, people outside the organization point to that as well. It was like that was a huge moment for them. Making that trade and CJ just saying, hey, look, this is a place I want to be for a couple of years. Like, this is not a temporary home for me. And him and Larry Nance Jr. both being like, we're just all in here. I think that CJ definitely played a role in helping kind of bring Zion back into the fold a little bit. And they definitely don't make that run to the playoffs without him, I don't think.
I mean, the Larry Nance comments the next day after they lost, and I didn't know if he was a rental player either. And he's like, I want to be a part of this. He goes, I didn't know that this crowd could get like this. You heard everything I'm talking about. But he's like, when that crowd was going during the playoffs, he goes, that's as good as I've heard any NBA crowd. And at first I'm like thinking, does he really mean that? But you could just tell. He was like, I want to be here for the long haul. And that's what warms my heart. As a guy from New Orleans, that people come and they want to stay, and that's what New Orleanians like. If you get any hint of like an Anthony Davis situation where, you're just waiting for the second you can get out the door, that's when they'll turn on you. But this franchise, you saw it in the Portland series. I'm not sure if you were around then, but that year.
That was before my time here. I was watching on
right
TV.
Before, right? They swept them 4-0. And then this past, the playoffs, I went to all the home games here. It was unbelievable. I mean, you've seen when there's nobody in the stands, in the arena. And then you saw that. I mean, did that just give you a little different take on the fan base here?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I was going to the Atlanta Hawks versus New Orleans Pelicans in October.
Rough.
Yeah, it was. I mean, completely
different.
You could
count the fans in the gym.
Oh yeah, and I mean, that was incredible. I mean, I think even Mike Wilbon said that the Pelicans, had the biggest home court advantage of any team in the playoffs. For someone who's an outsider, kind of a national talking
head. Isn't it?
Yeah, that is unbelievable to hear. I mean, they come out if you give them something.
We just saw a shot of Jose Alvarado. So the rookies, when you got the draft, everybody knew Murphy was a shooter. People that know basketball knew that, Herb Jones was a great defensive player. But I don't think anybody expected Herb to start or play as much. But this guy's become a guy that's going to seems like you're going to pencil him in for a long time. And then you got Alvarado as an undrafted free agent. Talk about what those three meant for this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, like, that was incredibly impactful for this team, going basically 3 for 3 in the 2021 draft. I think the draft record for this front office was a little bit spotty before that. And, the draft is kind of a crapshoot. You're just going to have some misses. But, I mean, huge moment for the franchise. I mean, by the end of the season, all three of those guys were rotation players on a playoff team. I just don't think that happens very often. It's just very rare for rookies to be positive contributors at the NBA level. And, I mean, Herb Jones was a revelation. I mean, I voted him, all defensive second team. I thought he was one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA last year. I mean, every single night it was like, okay, Herb, just go take the best guy on the other team and guard him for 35 minutes. And he did it every night.
And he gets his hands on everything. Remember that one game he had 3 block or tip shots from 3-pointers. I think that's an NBA playoff record. But that was an unbelievable run there. But this draft right here, and I want your opinion right now. I mean, obviously now you have a team you don't have to immediately plug in. Usually in the past, if you got a top 10 pick, you're going to expect that guy to play immediately in New Orleans for sure. But this was a luxury this team hasn't had. They had a top 10 pick that, hey, maybe we can get something maybe a little bit for the future, maybe be a role player, and hopefully he'll pan out. And that's, I guess, what they're drafting for, Dyson Daniels. And the first 3 picks, we know those guys are going to probably be all-stars without injury, right? But the rest of the draft, it's kind of like, okay, let's hope they pan out. So when you obviously knew they were going to take him before, or you probably knew they were looking at him. But what are your thoughts on what he is and what he can be?
Yeah, I'd heard for weeks leading up to the draft that Dyson Daniels was, on the short list of guys they had serious interest in. I thought basically he was the the player they most wanted, who was a realistic target at number 8.
Right.
And I thought basically, there was two ways it could go. Portland could either take him at number 7, and then New Orleans would have to explore a few different options. If he was on the board, I felt pretty confident they were going to take him. I think they're ecstatic.
Right.
I think even Trajan Langdon said it.
That's it.
There was kind of catharsis in the draft room when Portland passed on him at number 7, and he was there at 8. They happily took him. I just think he, fits this team so well, and I think he's got a chance to be, a positive contributor at the NBA level pretty quickly. 6'8" guard from Australia, very definitely a mature kid. Played for the G League Ignite, which is a relatively new thing, and was basically their starting point guard by the end of the season, and probably their best, steadiest player.
We always seem to overlook the second rounders, and for rightfully so. Most of them don't make the team. Some go to the G League, but they got a guy. I watched the NCAA tournament, Ohio State, E.J. Liddell. How's he pronounce it?
Yeah, Liddell.
Liddell. Yep. But this is a guy that I'm looking at him. How did he drop to 41? Last year when Herb was picked around that area, you're like, okay, this guy's going to probably be G League. Not saying he's going to have that kind of impact, but what is the talk around Pelicans camp about him?
Definite excitement that he was available there at 41. They didn't think he would be available in the second round. They had wanted to bring him in for a workout, but it didn't happen just because it didn't seem like they weren't going to take him at 8.
Right.
But
right.
It didn't seem in any way realistic that he was going to be there at 41.
Right. I saw projections in the 20s.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate that would be, but they had to. Obviously, they have contracts right now. Unless they make trades, he's going to immediately go to the G League, I'm imagining. What's the story with him potentially this season?
Yeah, I think the contract is something to watch. So the Dyson Daniels selection put them at 15 guaranteed contracts, right, which is the maximum you can have in an NBA team. I think if I had to bet on it today, he's probably on a 2-way, but I think it's still entirely possible that he does get maybe that last guaranteed spot, depending on what they do in the trade market. If they make a trade and send out 2 players and get back 1, maybe that potentially opens up a spot. But yeah, they were definitely thrilled, and he's got a chance to be a player. I was told they had a first round grade on him, so definitely a lot of excitement that he was there.
So back to Zion real quick before we let you go. You saw him, was it today, or did you see him recently? Have you seen him lately?
Yeah, I saw him at a camp he and his family are putting on at the Dryads YMCA, I think 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
I hate to even ask this because I know people talk about his physique, but how is he looking right now?
I thought he looked good.
Right.
I think I think obviously he was not in great shape at the start of the season, coming off that injury when he couldn't do a whole lot.
Right.
He looks a lot better than that to me right now. To be perfectly honest, he's still, physically wise, does not look like the guy who played at Duke to me.
Right.
And that's really the big question. If you can get in elite shape, he literally can be the best player in the NBA.
So he's definitely going to be here on July 1st. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think him and the Pelicans are going to be able to sign an extension. I think kind of the question is, how much guaranteed money is going to be in that contract. I think, he'll have the opportunity to make the maximum you can make, which is something like $186 million over 5 years. There'll be opportunity to make that. I think, what they'll need to negotiate is just exactly how much of this is guaranteed, how much of this is tied to games played, health, things like that.
It's never happened where a guy didn't sign that second deal, but it was weird at the beginning of the season, especially when he wasn't playing. There was talk everywhere, not just in New Orleans, but around the league, that he's never going to come back. And I was thinking, golly, who are they talking to? Who knows this for sure? And it's amazing what some success will do, even though he was watching it from a side. And now it's like almost a guarantee, thank goodness.
Winning's the best deodorant, right?
Isn't it? Isn't it? Hey, this is a tradition we've had. This ball it's got a lot of names like Karl Malone and a lot of coaches on here, but there would be the first one in blue. So I'm doing blue signatures since COVID because I was gone for 2 years. But give me a nice big Christian Clark, and I appreciate you. I appreciate this because I haven't had anybody talk Pels with me in 2 years on the show. So it's been fun. So I appreciate that. By the way, I have a lot of people to thank on this show. Obviously, Jay Ulhman and my producer, Will Hill. Always great to be back with Will. And the guys in the back, they get it done. Logan and Alex, and, of course, Jim Dotson and Ron Yeager here at WLE. Hey, we'll be back next week. I promise you, I told you we're going to have those LSU coaches coming. They promised me they're going to be here in the next 2 weeks. Brian Kelly, Mike McMahon, and, of course, the new baseball coach as well, Jay Johnson. See you next week on Primetime Sports.